I remember seeing him one time. He was during the second training camp, and he looked a little upset or a little whatever. And I said, "You okay, coach?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I just have to go cut some people."
It's hard.
And he hated it.
Sure.
Like, it broke his heart to cut them, but he cut them because he knew it was the best for. And, you know, if you don't make those kind of changes, whether it's sport or whether it's church, you actually disappoint the rest of the crew. And that's also part of it. If you accept mediocrity, right, then the real stars on your team will either no longer be stars of the team, or they'll go somewhere else because they expect to be stars, have the opportunity to be stars. And when things aren't addressed and things aren't, you know, made to be better, they just go somewhere else, and they should.
Right. Welcome to the Huntley Leadership Podcast, helping leaders be a positive catalyst in the people they support, the organizations they serve, and the communities they live. This podcast will make you think, laugh, and grit your teeth with new determination to make your parish or business a place of transformation, passion, and purpose. If you're still breathing, you are powered for impact. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Ron Huntley and I'll be your host today. It's the first time we've been in studio for a while, and so it's really nice to have our guest today, whose name is Bill Scollard. Bill, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
It's fun to have Bill on the show. We've been friends for a long time. Bill, we've met at St. Benedict Parish, where actually we've met at St. Mary's University, but really didn't get to know each other until St. Benedict Parish. And it was a lot of fun watching you come to faith in ways that were inspiring not only to me, but to the rest of the church. When I stepped away from my role at St. Benedict Parish, you were the person that stepped in. And it was just really fun to be able to journey with you and be inspired by you as a friend. And so, again, thank you for all that you do to build up the kingdom.
My pleasure.
Today's episode is going to be focused on what it means to turn something around. You know, turnarounds are challenging. The very fact that we're going to turn something around means it's probably going in the wrong direction, or it wouldn't need a turnaround. When turnarounds happen, it's not, you don't tweak to get a turnaround. There has to be some seismic shifts in thinking, in behavior, in order to turn something around, whether it's a business, whether it's a church, whether it's a sports team. And through our friendship, one of the things I've loved, and for those of you that are listening, Bill is a Hall of Famer in our in our university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, St. Mary's. And he played a key role on a team that really is legendary in the history of St. Mary's, St. Mary's University. And so, Bill, what brought you to Halifax? Because you didn't grow up here. Tell us a little bit about that story, because this is going to apply to people's businesses, their sports teams, and their church, even though it's not a church story.
Yeah, how did I get to Halifax? I finished up high school, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Honestly, I was kind of floundering around. Dad was a factory worker. I worked at the factory for a little bit. Went to college for a couple of years, took accounting. Not sure why, but I did. And then, I got to be, I was 21, 22. No one in my family had ever gone to university, so that really wasn't even, and I wasn't an academic, so that really wasn't an option, at least, in my thoughts. But I did get a phone call at a time when I was really struggling. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had actually gone. I played junior ball with him. He'd gone to St. Mary's the previous year. Mm-hmm. I'd never even heard of St. Mary's.
Sure.
He gives me a call. "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing nothing." And there was a story behind that, but we didn't get into it. But he said, "I was talking to the coach, and he's told me there might be some interest in you coming out to Halifax." So we had a brief chat about that, hung up the phone, terrified at the thought, right? I mean, one of two things in my mind was, I'm not fast, I'm not very big. I love football, but there's a point where it just, you can't get to the next level. Right. And this was definitely the next level. And the other piece was academically. I mean, I just wasn't very smart. I just didn't think I was very smart. And university, again, big leap academically. So got off the phone. Mom and Dad were in the living room. Dad was kind of on me at that point. You kind of get your life going, right? Get a job. Right. It'll probably be in the factory, and that's okay. That's his life, and just start doing what you do, right? So, who was it? Mom, who was on the phone? Oh, it's a Jerry, friend of mine. "Oh yeah, how is he? He's in Halifax, right?" "He is, yeah." And I, with some trepidation, I said, "Yeah." He actually called. There was a little bit of interest from the coach in me maybe going out there to St. Mary's University. And I guarantee you, the only expectation I had of my father at that point, he was going to say, you're 22 years old. It's time to kind of grow up, son, to stop playing games. And I'll be honest with you, I was terrified of the thought of going to Halifax. That would shut down that conversation. Perfect. And we'll just kind of get on with our life. So Mom said, wouldn't that be great? You could come see some of my relatives. Go see some of my relatives. Mom's born in Garsborough County in Nova Scotia. Turned to Dad, and he said, well, do they have a football team? Do you think you could play? Which was really not expected.
You didn't think, yeah.
And I said, they do have a football team, and they're not very good, and I don't know if I can play. Coach came out soon afterwards to meet my family. We went out for a bite to eat. And by the end of that dinner, I'd committed to go to St. Mary's. And a lot of people have asked me in the past, all the places you could go, why did you go to St. Mary's? And my absolute easy and honest answer was, because nobody else asked. 1985.
And that coach, he was relatively new to the team, too. Wasn't even coaching. Tell me.
Yeah, Larry Utek would be a name if you know anything about CFL. He was a great player in the day. He was in his second year at St. Mary's University. His career had ended a little bit early because of some injuries, his CFL career. Went up to Halifax to be an assistant coach with St. Mary's, and they got rid of the head coach soon afterwards and elevated him to the head coaching rank, his first one. And we were a terrible team. They were a terrible team back then. Hadn't won in a couple of years, and he was trying to...
Hadn't won what?
Hadn't won any games.
So nothing. We're not talking.
Hadn't won anything. They hadn't. I think it was 2.5 years. They had not won a football game. So by far, Atlantic was one of the weaker conferences in the country, the weakest conference in the country, and we were the worst team in the weakest conference, which made us the worst team in Canada.
Right.
And he was trying to put the pieces together to fix a program that was very broken. Had a great history back in the 70s, but it really declined in the last decade or so.
One of the things I love about sports is that there's a scorecard. There's a scoreboard.
There's a scorecard.
And whether or not you win or lose. It's not, you don't go out there and play a game and come out and say, I think we did pretty good. We're tired. We ran hard. Yeah. We were busy. We like each other. And so, way to go. It's like, no, you win or you lose. I think sometimes in business or in the church world, we can be really busy, but we don't know if we're winning or losing. And so I find we can delude ourselves for long periods of time. We can be on decline for long periods of time, but nobody seems to notice. I mean, we might notice in our gut, but we don't know how to speak about it. We don't have a language for it because we're not counting wins. We're not counting touchdowns. We're not, we don't know how to do any of that stuff. Right. And it's really dangerous. So tell me a little bit about, so you show up in Halifax, jump on a plane, I guess, or get a drive, or how'd you get here?
I jump on a plane for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
Landed in Halifax. I'm about to turn 23 years old. So that in itself is like, this is a little bit ridiculous, right? This is right. So I'm thinking one or two things are going to happen. I'm going to fail out academically because I'm not, or I'm not going to be good enough to play on this team because, again, too small, too slow, and I'll go back home and I'll join Dad at the factory and get on with my life. Right. So I got out there, and again, I was also thinking the only reason why I would even potentially make the team would be because the team was so bad.
Okay. Sure.
So I get out there and loving Halifax and training camps, fun. I see a lot of talent. I'm thinking like, oh my, if this team is going over, the other teams must be really good,
right?
Because it looks like we got some loaded. We got CFL draft picks. We got 4th and 5th year captains that are great football players, and I'm just trying to kind of keep up with it all. And it was a real positive experience. UTEC is making some changes to sort of the processes, the expectations, and and I feel like I'm trying to keep up. Some good days and some bad days. It's kind of the way training camp works with rookies.
Yeah, I bet.
But all in all, it's going pretty well for me.
Nice. Walk me through just take us through the.
Well, we're playing St. X again. Haven't won in 2.5 years. We're up in St. X, the first game, and I'm actually dressing and starting, which is kind of neat. We were a bit thin at receiver, so I had a chance to actually start. And first game against X, we're kind of dominating the game, at least from a yardage standpoint. But we're making just enough mistakes to keep it close. Late in the game, we're down 13-11. It's funny, 30-something years later, you still remember this. But we're down 13-11. We're hopefully driving again for to get down in terms of field goal position. Threw a long pass with about 15 seconds to go. It was actually the first pass I ever caught, and I caught it and fell down at the 3-yard line. There's like 8 seconds to go. So
when you say you fell down, did you get tackled or did you just trip?
I kind of dove as I caught it and just
good.
plunk, and they land on top of me. 3-yard line. There's like 5 or 6 seconds to go in the game.
Perfect.
And as soon as I got up, I thought, we win. We're going to come down here. We're going to kick a 10-yard field goal.
Who can't do that?
Chip shot.
Yeah.
And we're going to win. We get down there. We quickly, our quarterback, instead of calling a timeout, quickly rushes us up to the line of scrimmage. And all I'm thinking is, what's he doing? Just call a timeout, Terry. Just call a timeout. And then I'm about to call a timeout, and I'm thinking, I'm a rookie. I can't be calling a timeout here. This is not my role on this team.
Gotta get hammered.
And you kind of look at it, and he calls a dive play, just a quick handoff. We get stuffed, and the time runs out. And I mean, I'm just stunned. We're just stunned. Coach Utek comes out. He's screaming at the quarterback, just screaming at him. Why did you call a timeout? Why did you? Right? And it's just one of the other teams celebrating, and we're walking off the field. And it's one of those, that's the worst loss ever that I've been associated with, right? Get into the dressing room, pretty quiet, taking off our stuff, and it's just, how did we lose that football game? And I realized a few minutes into that, I'm looking around, getting a feel for what's going on, and people aren't upset. There's a lot of talking, some laughing. Right, I'm hearing from some of the more senior guys, where they're going downtown after we get back to Halifax, and I'm just thinking, how can we not be more upset than this?
Right.
It's just not. There's something's not right. But again, I'm a rookie. I just got rookies. Shut your mouth and play hard. Keep your head down. Right.
Yep.
So I just kind of took all that in. The bus ride back from Antigonish. Again, joking and laughing, and just way too much of that, considering what we just experienced. Right. Okay. Practice all week, good practice as I recall. We're going up to Acadia, week 2, and they'd won the conference the previous year.
Okay.
So we're into it there. First experience with the Acadia fans, who just were so abusive.
That's awful.
Especially the rookies. They were tough on us. Yeah, the crowd's right on top of us. Good game. We're back and forth. But we're in it. We're down 12-11.
Come on.
Late in the game. We're driving down. We get down to about the 20-yard line with seconds remaining. I'm thinking, cool.
Yeah.
Field goal.
Yeah.
We win. We're 1-1. Could be 2-0, but we're 1-1, and we just beat the previous year's conference championship. Cool. I'm one of the roles I've got is I'm the holder for field goals.
Yes.
Buddy of mine, Jerry, who is Jerry Foster, who was one who actually initially called me as a field goal kicker, and he's comfortable with me holding, right?
Gotcha.
That's cool. So, we call the huddle, got field goal, come up there, pin it down, or we're supposed to pin it down. So, I look to the center to get the snap. He snaps it 30 feet over my head.
Oh, you did.
Kicker's running for it. I'm running for it. We all get tackled. We lose 12-11.
Stop it.
We lose 12-11. It's like I thought last week was the worst loss ever. This is the worst loss ever. Katie's going crazy, celebrating, and we're like, that is we're 0-2, should be 2-0, at worst 1-1, and just head down into the dressing room, right? Undo and taking the tape off and everything. Look around again. Nobody's really, really upset. Not nobody, but there's just a sense in the room, a tone in the room, especially on some of the more senior guys, our seniors at least, that this isn't devastating. This isn't like, are you invested in this or not? That was absolutely what just happened out there. Some laughing, talking about the bars that we're going to later on today. And I'm thinking, what a bunch of losers. What a bunch of losers. Wow. So then so I have a tough weekend because I'm thinking, what am I doing about this? So I'm thinking, I got to go talk to Coach Utek. And all my fibers going I'm a rookie. Shut your mouth. You have got no right to be raising your voice in this area. Just be quiet and, contribute.
Keep your head down. Yeah.
And I don't really know Coach Utek that well. I had dinner with him. That's the only time we've actually spent any time together. He's a pretty quiet guy.
Sure.
So anyway, go to his office, knock on the door. He sees me. Hey, come on in. We sit down. He had an old typewriter. This is 1985, right? He had an old typewriter, and he was perpendicular to him, and he's tap, 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 tap. And in between sort of tap, 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 he kind of looks over. How you doing? I said, well, good. Tap, 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 tap. And he says, what can I do? What can I do for you? And I'm thinking, am I really going to say this? I'm like, okay. And he may absolutely lose it. I have no idea about Coach. So I finally say, Coach, I don't think this team wants to win. And then I'm like waiting for it, right? He doesn't say anything. Tap, 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 tap. And after a long pause, he says, sorry, what'd you say? I think he didn't hear me. Shoot.
I have to say it twice.
Yeah, I got to say it twice. So louder, kind of looks over, and I said, I don't think this team wants to win. Just let it hang out there, right? I'm waiting to get kicked out of his office. That'd be the end of it. And again, tap, 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 tap. You're right. Tap, 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 tap. I don't know what he was going to say. I didn't expect him to say that. So I continue sitting there, and he's tap, 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 tap. Finally looks over me and says, what do you plan on doing about that? And I'm thinking, like, I have no idea what I'm planning, right? I'm thinking, what do I say to that? I'm a rookie. I've been here 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Like, what role? My role isn't that, right? And so I didn't answer because I had nothing to say. He said, I brought you and people like you on this team to fix that, help fix that. Okay. And we had a good chat.
Did you?
About culture and about winning and about turnaround and what's required. And not everyone's going to be here, but this is what has to happen. And I just sat there. It was a clinic for me. I just sat there and soaked it up.
Wow.
Soaked it up. And he told me what my role needed to be within that scenario. I left there thinking like, wow. Like,
so he saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself.
Clearly.
You're seeing yourself, I'm a rookie. I have a role. I'm taking a risk, fully expecting to get hammered and sent packing. And instead, this coach says, this is what I saw in you. This is what I need from you.
Right.
Wow.
And I heard him say many times before, it's not just the 4th and 5th year guys that are leaders. We're all leaders on this team. And his expectation is we will lead from every position, or he'll find other people who will.
Yeah.
That was the message I was getting.
Okay.
So the rest of the season sort of played out. Again, coach trying to instill, but he also had taken over a number of players who, quite frankly, had been beaten up over the years, and it was just
right.
It was you needed the players who were going to win, and quite frankly, some of them just weren't signing up for it, kind of playing out the string and whatnot. So that year we continued to lose, lost all our games. Not true. We at the end of that year we actually won 2 of the last 3. We were 0-5, and then we finished 0-4.
The first 2 wins in 3 games,
which was nice. Which was nice. We also we went up to Acadia last game of the season and beat them by about 45. Now you could argue they're in the playoffs. We're not. Maybe they're resting all their players, but
sure.
We kind of got rolling that year. I scraped through academically. Went home, but had really found something at St. Mary's that really
gave you purpose.
Really resonated with me. So. Went back to the factory and worked in the summer. If I wasn't working, I was working out to get myself in better shape and get a little bit bigger. I arrived there. I was 6 feet tall, 171 pounds.
Okay,
that's little. and I made up for with that for being very slow. So it's like it was, but I was working on all those things.
He's light, but he's slow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, makes up with a lack of speed. So went there for my second year. Went to training camp, excited about what could be happening. And first day training camp, you always meet with the whole team.
Yes.
And this is not on the field. This is actually in a classroom type environment, theater type environment. So we met there, and back then there were probably about 65 players.
Okay.
They're much bigger now, but it was 65 players were there. A bunch of guys coming back. We were adding in some new guys, obviously. Again, first meeting. So we got 65 players there. We've got all the support staff, all the physios, all the assistant coaches. Are all there, so it's kind of bring it all together and let's kind of set the tone for the
State of the Union.
Well, State of the Union, by coach, and this is really coaches. This is the first time he's really had a chance to do that. Because last year was just his first year, and I think he was just sort of figuring out what he's got, kind of thing, right?
Yep.
So we're all in a room again, kind of picture theater seating, maybe 100 people there, and he comes in, kind of shh, everyone, because coach comes in and starts off by saying. In 3 years, this team's going to play in the national championship. And just sat there. One person laughed. Not for very long. Laughed. And I remember coach just looking in the eyes. all the players and coaches, everybody else. Let that sit for a long time. Then repeated it. In 3 years, this team is going to play in the national championship. And again, I just remember him. And this is the way it's going to play out. And I remember the first thing he said was, not all of you are going to make it, because winning's not for everybody. Some people are built for, everybody wants to win, but there's not a lot of people that are willing to do what it needs to be done to win. And some of you are going to exit yourself from that. You're going to make a decision not to, and that's okay. You got to go find something you're more passionate about than football. And for others, if you stick around, there's something magical about a turnaround. When we start to win, it'll be one of the greatest experiences of your life that you'll be able to draw on for the balance of your life if you stay. He had everybody in that room. Everybody in that room. This is how it has to happen. He talked about work ethic. He talked about showing up dressed to play. He talked about expectations. He talked about first stringers becoming second stringers. He talked about second stringers not dressing. And you all got to be okay with that, because we're not good enough in this room right now. So I'm going out to recruit. He would always say this. Soon as I recruit you, I'm going to try to find somebody better than you to replace you. That's how it works. So I guarantee you, he said, not everyone's showing up tomorrow for practice, and that's okay. And during the course of this training camp, I'm unfortunately going to have to remove some of you folks because you just aren't able to do it, and that's okay. You go find something else you're passionate about.
Wow.
But we're going to play in the national championship in 3 years.
I can just hear, I could just imagine, there's so many things running through my head right now. You just talk about vision. Like that, we're going to play in a, however many words that is, that's a very short sentence. In 3 years, this team is going to play in the national championship.
And think how absurd the comment is.
Worst team in the worst conference.
And Maclean's, which is a Canadian magazine here, he used to do a preseason report on college football. And they'd rank teams 1, 2, I think it was 22, 23, whatever, how many teams we had. And they did a big write-up in Maclean's magazine about each team.
Yeah.
Western was ranked number 1. Okay. Which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
They had maybe 3/4 of a page on their team. We were ranked last, number 23, and I remember it was literally 2 lines. Haven't won in 2 years, no expectation they will win this year. And I was accurate. I was absolutely accurate.
Not casting stone to the sports pundits here.
Well, you talk about numbers.
Right.
Those were the numbers. Weak conference, worst team in the weak conference, worst team in Canada. True. At least from a result standpoint, which in football, that's the scorecard.
It'd be interesting to have him do his APEST evaluation. All the shepherds listening right now are just reeling at the thought of saying something, like to have a vision that big that it's okay if some people don't come along. Yeah. So often in churches I see, Bill, we keep the same people in the same roles, even though we know they're not doing a very good job. And in fear of hurting their feelings, we just avoid the conversation altogether and hope somehow the church is mysteriously going to get much better at all kinds of different things. And really it boils down to just like that coach, willing to, if we're here and we're going to get here, we're going to have to think differently. We're going to have to make difficult decisions. We can't get from here to there unless we have people who want to turn something around, who want to be one of the best churches in their country or in their diocese. And so often it's well, we're as good as the others. At least we're playing football. It's why is that the goal? We're playing church. Why is playing church the goal? When people's friends and kids are perishing, they're turning away from faith. They don't care. They're disengaged. And we know it. And yet we keep just dialing it in. And Maclean's magazine is writing your church down, your parish, in terms of results it's getting, very unlikely to ever convert somebody to Jesus.
Right.
We're making 0 new Christians and likely not to make any again this year. How many Maclean's magazines on churches would say that about different parishes? And then we have, and again, it doesn't have to be this way, but we're coaching into a culture that doesn't want to win.
Right. We're okay with participation medals.
Yeah.
And Jesus is not okay with participation medals. We are not there to show up.
No, cut that tree down. It's not bearing any fruit.
We're there to change lives.
Right.
Amen.
Wow. Okay, keep going.
Yeah.
I get so fired up. This is the best parish renewal conversation ever, and has nothing to do with parishes in one sense.
Building on what you just said, I remember Coach Utek. He was a real sensitive guy, real quiet guy, real sensitive guy. I remember seeing him one time. He was during the second training camp, and he looked a little upset or a little whatever. And I said, "You okay, Coach?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I just have to go cut some people."
It's hard.
And he hated it.
Sure.
Like it broke his heart to cut them, but he cut them because he knew it was the best for. And you know, if you don't make those kind of changes, whether it's sport or whether it's church, you actually disappoint the rest of the group, and that's also part of it. If you accept mediocrity, right, then the real stars on your team will either no longer be stars of the team, or they'll go somewhere else because they expect to be stars, have the opportunity to be stars, and when things aren't addressed and things aren't made to be better, they just go somewhere else, and they should.
Right.
And
they should. Yeah.
And they should.
Well,
so we start second year. Although we didn't have the wins and losses weren't coming there yet. Coach Utek always said, once we get the culture, once we fix the culture, hardest thing in the world to do, he said, then the wins come. Wins don't come before the culture. They're the last thing to actually have happen. So you really got to trust in the process. You got to trust in the people because you're not going to get the results right away. And you just got to stay the course and be strong and continue to kind of, love each other when no one else is loving you.
Right.
Because it's tough sled. Again, we
were
the butt of a lot of jokes, and it's been 10, 12, 13 years since we'd actually won. So we start the season. You could tell there was a different tone. Like Utek he was getting the right people in place. He was moving the other people were graduating, or and the ones who were staying. Like you don't have to get I remember him telling me you don't have to get everybody to come on board. You just got to get sort of the key members, whatever 20%, whatever the number is. The rest will follow, but you got to get those key 20. And he was identifying those key 20 and making damn sure we knew our roles in that, because we needed to help sort of bring
the rest along,
bring everybody else along. So we lost first couple of games. We actually won a game, which was great. And then we had we were 1-2, and we had a national game, TSN broadcast game from Husky Stadium in Halifax, which in 1986, I guess, was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because there was no national coverage. There was no, you couldn't, all the technology that's there today. It was a big deal. And the St. Mary's had lost so much. It wasn't like, we weren't getting on TV if there's anybody on TV. Anyway, national audience on a Friday night in Halifax. And, for a lot of people from Ontario and other places, our families get to watch, which is kind of fun. So we're pretty excited about being there. We had actually won a game, so we're starting to feel a little bit better about ourselves. St. FX beat us 41-0. I think it was 34-0 at the half.
Wow.
Right? And then they just shut it down, and we just limped to the finish line. I remember leaving the field and looked over, and there was a TSN tent. It's a portable tent they set up for the broadcasts.
Sure.
And I remember seeing Coach on broadcast talking about this game, defending our whatever. He's got to talk about the game that we just read. I'm thinking, what, to put him in that position. Like, what could he possibly say, right? Go into the dressing room. It was pretty quiet in the dressing room. And at one point, Coach Utek comes in, right? And he's like, shh, 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 right? He comes in, and I have no idea what he's going to be like. But he could completely lose it, and we deserve it. Like, blast us for that effort or lack of effort, right? And he comes in, and a real quiet voice says, come close. I need you all close. Again, not a big team, 60 guys, right? And we kind of get close, no closer. So we're just piled around him, shoulder to shoulder and whatnot. And in a fairly quiet voice, he says, and I have no idea, right? He says, I owe everybody in this room an apology. And again, pin drop, can't hear a word, right? He says, clearly, I did not have this team prepared to play football today, and that's all on me. And he said, and as long as I've got the honor of coaching this team, I promise you, that will never, ever happen again. And he spoke more about that. And he said, I will have you prepared for every game we play, win or lose. That preparation starts tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. at the top of
Goresbrook Hill.
Goresbrook Hill. We're going to run some sprints. Anybody not showing up is no longer part of this team. Have a good night. And left. He could have gone down a couple of different routes.
Yeah.
But everybody in that room was in at that point.
He took ownership.
It sent a message to everybody else that we had to take ownership. balance of the year, we went 2-5, just like last year, but it was a different 2-5. We were in more of the games. There was a different tone, a different feel.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So again, go home, work in the factory, train. Excited about what year 3 looks like. Oh, in the second year, the team votes the captains with 5 or 6 captains. And the team voted me one of the captains.
Gotcha.
Which was a real honor to do that for a second year guy, which I was honored to do that. And I took that really, really seriously. Went home, trained, came back for year 3. At that point, again, we'd had another good recruiting year in all areas, actually. And we'd picked up a particularly good quarterback out of the Quebec League, which he had big reputation, at least in the Quebec League, of in junior ball there, of being good. We start the season, we're winning. I think we're 2-2 at some point, which is kind of exciting, and a lot of close games. But we seem to be able to win those close games, which is also a part of kind of the evolution, if you will. Good teams, tough teams can find out how to find a way to win. And we went 5-2, which was exciting. Made the playoffs for the first time in, I think, 15 years. Won a playoff game against Acadia, which was unexpected. They were the favorite. And then we actually were in the Atlantic Bowl, which is a big deal here in Halifax. It's in Husky Stadium, actually, which is a kind of home team for us. Bishops came to play in the Atlantic Bowl. We were ranked number 1 offense in Canada. They were ranked number 1 defense in Canada. Okay. So it's going to be an offense against a defense thing. And I'm 1 year ahead. Okay. We're in Atlantic Bowl in '87 against McGill.
Okay.
Against McGill, number 1 defense and number 1 offense. Great game, back and forth. And we're up by 2, 29-27. They're driving down. They convert a couple of third downs on the drive.
Shoot.
And on the last play of the game, Chuck Pettipaw, I'll never forget his name, their field goal kicker, kicks a 48-yard field goal with no time remaining to beat us 30-29. They go to the Vanier Cup. We don't.
Oh, my. That's a killer.
9,000 people at Husky Stadium going crazy the whole game. And right, devastating loss, but when you take a step back, it's like, but great.
How far have we come in such a short period of time?
Great progress, right? 2 years into this journey, and we're in the thick of this thing, right? Go home, train hard. UTEC adds more people. Other people leave. Culture continues to build. Expectations are crystal clear on what's expected and what won't be tolerated. We go into the season ranked number 1 in the country. All right, so
3 years later, you're ranked number 1.
2 years.
2 years later.
2 years, we're ranked number 1 in the country because we'd had a really great season, and virtually everybody was coming back. UTEC had a couple of good recruiting years. McLean's had us, a much longer article than the previous one. We go 7-0 in the conference, which and expectations are super high. We're really rolling over the Atlantic Conference. Offense with Chris Flynn, our quarterback, is putting up some ridiculous numbers. We win the playoff game. We're back in the Atlantic Bowl. And we're playing, and then again, Bishops comes to town in 1988. Bishops, not to get too deep into it, but Chris Flynn, who was this great quarterback who came there, he's supposed to go to Bishops. He committed to go to Bishops, came out for a recruiting trip to Halifax, loved Coach UTEC and the environment he was in, and ended up kind of shocking everybody by coming here. So Bishops wasn't too pleased. Bishop comes in with the number 1 defense. We've got the number 1 offense. And we rolled over him pretty good.
Okay.
Beat him up pretty good.
Okay.
To go to the now we're in the Vanier Cup.
The national championship.
The national championship.
3 years later.
In Toronto, 3 years later. Half the guys had never been on a plane before. It was a different world back then. Of course, They announced us that we were all on the plane coming up. A bunch of the guys got to go into the cockpit while they're flying to check that out. Which
pre 9/11.
Pre 9/11, it wouldn't happen today. And we had a really solid game against a very tough team. Ended up losing. Yeah, but that's some unique circumstances around that might be a story for another day.
Sure,
as they say. But again, the results there. 3 years, to the day, if you will. Coach UTEC's prediction is that we're going to play in a national championship. Coming from the worst team in Canada is how we're going to do it. 3 years later, we play in the national championship.
And so, Bill, I mean, I find it such an inspiring story, and I know there's so many other stories as a part of that because we've been friends for a while, and it's just so fun because, like he said, you're going to be able to dig into this experience and use it for the rest of your life in all kinds of other areas. And I know you have.
Right.
Like, this guy has just been an incredible person in Halifax. Like, they have a street named after him, and he was a counselor, and I know he's been a giant in the lives of so many people, and especially yours. I know how much respect you have for him, but he's looking at that scoreboard, and he's saying that scoreboard's not going to change until we change the culture.
Right.
What did that mean? What did that look like? Like, what was the culture that you think he was trying? Like you mentioned, they just didn't want to win.
Yeah.
What was the culture that needed to shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough losing a lot.
I know.
You get to a point where, and I would say the senior players on that team in '85, my first year, had basically, won 2 football games in 4 years.
Right.
Kind of thing, right? And there didn't seem to be any reason for optimism that was going to change. The sort of accepting of mediocrity was there. There wasn't a lot of pushing of the players to be their absolute best. In sports you hear the term the coach lost the room, or the coach lost
the dressing room,
and that was probably the case. Is that at some point change has to happen, and change from the top has to happen to really send the message this is actually going to be different. So when Coach came on board, he was absolutely aware that had to be the case. He knew it wouldn't be an overnight thing. He knew he had to change the culture. He knew that everybody wouldn't buy into the culture, and that was fine. And you'd be exited one way or another, yourself or by him. You had to find people who were willing to buy into a culture. And also, you need to find people who were willing to go on a bit of a journey, because this wasn't going to get fixed tomorrow. This was a vision of a coach sitting there saying, we haven't won a football game in 3 years, but I see something in you that's going to help us get that. Does that always happen? No, it doesn't actually happen.
No.
And that. So, it's much easier to go to a program that's winning a lot already, and that's okay.
Yes.
But there's something really magical about going to a program that hasn't won and be part of the change and can be able to speak to that. So, again, there was just that feeling. I remember those first 2 games we lost, and the kind of the acceptance of that loss. No, it kind of lacked. And again, this isn't universal. There were some great guys on that team that became part of the future in this, and even the guys who you were kind of beat down a little bit, those 4th and 5th year guys. I feel for them because, at some point you're just kind of throwing up your arms going like nothing's going to fix this.
Right.
At least in the time I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
Right. So, so it really became sort of a top to bottom change in culture, which created a completely different expectation. And the great thing about it is it starts with Coach Utek down. And the great cultures, it filters down. Right, so coach has got assistant coaches who got to buy in, and the positional coaches got to buy in, and the captain's got to buy in, and the players got to buy in. And I knew about year 3, when the players were policing each other, is when we knew the culture was entrenched. Right before, if somebody's not running hard, coach, a couple of times a year just completely lost it. I think it was all strategically done, where he'd completely lose it for 10 minutes.
Yeah, scare the daylights out of everybody.
Scare the hell out, right?
Yeah.
That actually filtered down to playing our role. Captains and leaders on the team would police each other. When a guy wasn't running sprints hard enough, it wasn't UTEC yelling at him; it was us yelling at him.
Yeah,
like it just became no, this is culture. And I don't know if I wouldn't say I'm a huge New England Patriots fan. But I am for a lot of reasons, and they spent a couple of decades creating a culture. No matter what pieces they put into the culture was in place by their coach to win.
Right.
And in the world of the NFL these days, when free agency, whatnot, it's hard to get dynasties. They still had a dynasty because they had the best culture in the NFL, because the expectation was to win, and they bring in people who would win, or they would adapt the people to win, and they would get rid of the ones that weren't.
Well, you talk about coming into that first training camp, and you're saying, my gosh, if this team is having 0 wins, the other teams must be awfully good because there's all this talent. But you take this great talent in a bad culture,
right,
and it can't win.
Right. Need them both.
And I see that so often in churches.
Right.
You have great people there, but there's just no expectation that we're going to make a difference. I'll never forget Father Michael Leclerc, who was our first intern, came, and he called himself Father Fuddy Duddy. He said, "I'm just here for a couple of tips." And, and he just really, and I thought, tips aren't going to cut it. And, it's going to take way more than a couple of tips. And I love his story, and he's told this story several times, that at St. Benedict, coming up to Easter Vigil, there were all kinds of adults coming into full communion with the faith. And he didn't know anybody did that anymore. And so he called back to his church back in Montreal and said, "When's the last time we had an adult baptism?" And it was in the 70s. And he repented. He realized, what am I doing? Like he became a Larry Utek at that moment. He realized, I can't keep playing church or doing church and not getting victories in the form of transformed lives, of people becoming Christians. And it changed everything. And that church is booming now. It's absolutely booming. They've helped so many other churches in a secular city, inspiring them to learn how to lead in ways that create new Christians. And we used to do something called the Pentecost Challenge, because we realized that St. Benedict, all these people's lives were changed, but the only thing, what do you value what you count? What were we counting? How many communions were distributed? How many people went through baptism, first communion, first confession, marriage, and assuming that those lead to the different breakthroughs in becoming a disciple, but they're not in this culture. They're not. I mean, it'd be nice if they were. Maybe they used to be. They're not anymore. And so we're counting things that don't equal discipleship.
We had a priest come in, and his name escapes me. It might come as I tell the story. But he came in, and at the time I was still working, actually, but somehow somebody thought it would be a good idea for me to run the baptismal ministry. Father James. I'm like, really? Okay. Really?
Father Simon. What is
no,
Father
it was
Simon?
Father James.
Was
it was
okay,
Father James.
Okay.
Yeah, he brought me in, and then Father Simon kind of took over at that point.
Gotcha.
But I remember I was in the office. Father James said, "You got 5 minutes here." He said, "I need you." We sit down in his office. "I need you to run the baptismal ministry." I'm like, really? and I can't say no to him, right? So next thing I'm running the baptismal ministry. But the approach we took and still do at St. Benedict is that it is not we're just not going to do the transaction of baptism. We get the phone calls. Somebody doesn't come to our church, says, I'm looking to get my our granddaughter baptized. We're available July 13th if you guys are, type thing. So that's not the way it works. We need to establish some relationship, and we hope this is going to be a forever relationship versus just a transaction. And we sit down with them. They go through a 3-week journey with us, almost like a mini ALF, if you will, to introduce the church and introduce what the expectation is. And at that point, it's not an automatic that they're going to be baptized. At that point, we decide whether baptism is going to take place. It's not a yes or no. It's a not right now. Because again, we just won't do the transaction with no expectation.
Because they're being baptized into a family of faith, but if they don't even want to belong, it'd be like me going to SMU and saying, "I'd love to be initiated as part of this year's crop into the football team."
Right.
It's like, bro, but you don't play football.
Right.
Well, I don't want to play football. I just like initiations.
Right. My grandparents want me to play football just for a day, kind of thing. It doesn't work that way.
Give me a jersey.
We established that process, and it continues on today. And again, a whole lot of it's focused on the parents, obviously, to create expectations for them and also show them what it could be.
Yeah.
It's the first step of a long journey we want to take with you, kind of thing, right? Greatest gift you can give your child is to be baptized
in a relationship with Jesus.
In relationship with Jesus and
the church.
And we want that for you, and we really want that for your, so we're very gentle about it. It isn't like a hard...
Yeah, it's not judgment and you're not good enough.
And guess what? Yeah. When we offer up that opportunity, some people say no and they phone the next church, and that's right. It breaks our heart, but that's okay. Because we gotta believe in what we're trying to do here, and Jesus looking down saying, like, don't do that, don't do the transaction. I'm not signing up. Well, one of the priests came, sat through kind of our baptism meeting, and we sort of took him through the philosophy of this, and he had come from Ontario, and at the end of the thing, he just listened. At the end of it, he was kind enough to share that he was absolutely wrecked, because he said in the last year or two, I think it was in the 2 years, he'd done 800 baptisms in their diocese.
Oh, right, because they have Catholic schools,
800 baptisms, and was not convinced that one person was still going to church.
Right.
Broke his heart.
Yeah, a lot of people
And he said,
get them baptized because they want to send them to a Catholic church.
Check the box.
Or a Catholic school.
Yeah, check the box. I was guilty as anybody in my younger years of check the box.
Yeah, and we were the same way at St. Benedict when we started. We started measuring what does success look like, and we started to define that. And I know that is appalling for some of our listeners who are in church ministry, but Jesus, after he talked about, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no life in you, and a bunch of the disciples got up and left, and he looked at his apostle and he said, do you want to leave too? Like,
where are we going to go?
Right? You have the words of eternal life. But the point is, like, why are we doing this, and should it matter? And I know for us, like, we realized there's a lot of lives being changed, but we're not measuring them, and we want to measure them. And so we decided that at Pentecost, we were going to define what a disciple meant. And you became a disciple when you've had a transformational encounter with Jesus, and from there, you've chosen to surrender and follow. That's when you go from not being a disciple to being a disciple, from not being a Christian to being a Christian. Then you have the rest of your life to be discipled. Right. But then asking people, would anybody say in the last 12 months that you've had an life-changing encounter with Jesus and have chosen to surrender and follow? And it was a scary thing to do. I remember Father James, the very first time he did, he's petrified because he did it on the vigil mass, which is often a more quiet mass. And so a lot of times elderly people have trouble with the hearing, and so the quieter mass is more enjoyable for them. But, they've also been with the program for a long period of time where we haven't made new Christians. There isn't even an expectation in most Catholic churches that anybody is going to go from not being a Christian to being a Christian. And so I remember when he asked that question, he had people to ask them to stand up and come to the front, and there's just silence. And somebody snickered. Yep. Just kind of like that guy did when UTEC said we're going to be in the championship. Yep. And then finally some people started coming forward, and then there was an audible gasp, because that's the culture of the church back then. We didn't expect anybody to come to faith. And so often when I'm coaching churches, they'll say to me, I don't want to do that because what if nobody comes up? And I'm thinking to myself, that's not what UTEC did. If I'm a pastor and nobody in my church, we're doing church all year and nobody's coming to faith, I want to know. And then I want to take responsibility, because I know everybody in those pews has friends, family members, and neighbors who've either fallen away or don't know Christ at all. Right. And if that's the case, then I wonder if you could take responsibility for that and do the same thing UTEC said and look them in the eye and say, that's on me. I'm so sorry that I haven't created a space, an environment, a culture with the right on-roads that you can bring your family and friends to faith, and that will never happen again. Every year that we measure who's become a new disciple, a new Christian, we're going to have numbers, and starts tomorrow. We're going to start at the top.
Right,
of course,
and you got to face the brutal facts.
Yeah,
and it's a hard thing to do. You got to call yourself out. You got to call others out, and that's a hard thing to do because a lot of people don't want to face the hard facts. They're quite willing to be that fluffy. There's really not a scorecard. Well, there's people kinda. Are you doing evangelization? Well, we're kinda. It's hard, and it's hard. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
We're built to be in community. We're built to walk with others. God didn't build us to walk this thing alone. First thing Jesus did when he started his ministry was he found 12 broken people, messy people, to make a life group, and we're trying to model that as best we can there, because it's so critical to be walking with others, to be loved and supported by others, to be called out by others in our faith journey. We talk about big church and small church. Got to be there on Sunday. Great preaching, great music, that community. But you got to be there during the week in the smaller groups, just loving each other and supporting each other along this path, hopefully all the way to heaven. The goal.
Amen. I love that. And so, Bill, I know that when I was doing some work over in Dartmouth with Father Toshiku's church, I had you come over and run our staff retreat and be a keynote speaker for our mission. And so I know speaking is something that you've really taken to heart over the years. You've been doing some amazing work speaking. I've spoken at some of the DR conferences and done workshops and really helped teams, build teams, change culture, inspire faith. And so I just want to give a shout out to you and all the work that you're doing to not only do your role at St. Benedict Parish, but also to be a blessing to other churches and other ministries to help them learn how to win.
Well, the funny thing about public speaking, the introvert that I am, it is not my first choice.
Right.
And I look at you right now, and as you share those words, and thank you. The memory I had was you inviting me to a leadership summit very early in this journey to work in the kitchen, help out in the kitchen, which I can do that, right? I remember watching this leadership summit. I wasn't part of it, and you walking up to me and saying, "Hey, Bill, I was just talking to Father James. We both think it'd be a good idea for you to share your testimony at the upcoming men's breakfast." And then you walked away. I hauled you back, and I said, like, what are you talking about? You saw there's 100 or so men that meet on a regular basis, and we'd like to share your testimony. And I'm like, what is a testimony? I don't even know what a testimony is. What are you talking about? Right? And my heart just coming out of my chest. And, of course, I can't say no to this kind of stuff. So I did, and it was a blessing.
Yeah.
And many times God has used me in sort of a speaking role. And I'm never comfortable with it. I'm never worthy of it. But I know He doesn't want my comfort or my worthiness. He just wants my yes. And it's always been an unbelievable blessing. So I surrender reluctantly to that, and let Him use me. Let Him use me, God. It's been such an unbelievable journey. The last 10 years. Didn't know Jesus 10 years ago. Never read a word of the Bible 10 years ago. God's got a plan. Wasn't mine.
Man. Amen. Bill, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your story of being a part of a turnaround, but then also, too, in your work in the church, really striving to, leaders solve problems. And when new leaders come in, teams come in, they see things differently, and they see problems, and they go to work solving them. And I know you've been such a core part of Father Simon's team of solving problems that you guys inherited from us to make the situation even better. And so thanks for all you do. I really mean that. And for all of you that are listening and tuning in, thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the thumbs up button on YouTube. Really appreciate you doing this journey with us. If you're looking for a speaker, maybe you're part of a men's group, or you're doing men's conferences, or you're leading staff retreats, or you're doing missions, reach out to Bill. How would they get a hold of you, Bill?
Bill S. at stbenedict.ca.
Bill S. at stbenedict.ca.
Love to hear from you.
Wonderful. That's terrific. Thank you very much. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.